The polished concrete floor felt slick under my bare feet, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone, the distant hum of servers a low, insistent thrumming in the vast, sterile room. I stood before the console, a single screen glowing cool blue in the dim light, reflecting in my eyes. My fingers hovered over the keys, steady now, after weeks of trembling, after months of shattering. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the quiet devastation that had unfolded within its steel and glass heart, or the precise, surgical strike about to be launched from its forgotten corners. Every breath was a calculated inhale, every exhale a release of years of banked fire. This wasn't about anger anymore. Anger burns hot and fast, leaving ash. This was about cold, absolute rebalancing. My thumb twitched, settling on the enter key. One tap. That was it. The culmination of sleepless nights, of tracing digital footprints that led to places I never imagined, to a betrayal so profound it felt like organ failure. My name shimmered on the screen, a ghost reaching out from the wreckage, ready to claim what was stolen. The cursor blinked, waiting. And I pressed it. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Our life was built on postcards. Not the glossy kind you buy at gift shops, but the ones we made up in our heads. Future home. One read, showing a porch swing we'd never sat on. Kids playing another, depicting a backyard we didn't own. Every spare dollar, every skipped dinner out, every delayed vacation, it all went into the shimmering pot-labeled down payment. It wasn't just money. It was condensed hope, distilled sacrifice, the physical manifestation of a shared dream we nurtured with whispered plans late at night. He was the anchor, or so I believed. Steady, reliable, his hand always warm around mine. We'd walk through neighborhoods, pointing at houses, mentally rearranging furniture, picking paint colors. That money, our fund, was sacred. It was the bedrock upon which our future home would stand. Mine was mostly inherited, a small but significant amount left by my grandmother, saved and untouched for years, waiting for this exact purpose. His contribution was smaller, earned labor, but it was the shared act of saving, the joint vision, that mattered. It felt like we were weaving our destinies together, thread by thread, dollar by dollar. The balance in that dedicated savings account wasn't just a number, it was a promise growing heavier, more tangible with each passing month. I would check it online sometimes, just to see it, this growing nest egg, and feel a quiet thrill, a sense of security settling deep in my bones. This was ours. This was safety. This was the next chapter. The first crack was small, almost imperceptible. A missed text back, a vague excuse about late nights at work, a certain distance in his eyes when I talked about open houses. Nothing I could point to, just a subtle shift in the air around him, like the pressure dropping before a storm. I rationalized it. Stress. Work pressure. Maybe I was being needy. The down payment fund kept growing, that solid number a constant comfort. It was proof of our shared goal, our shared future, wasn't it? We talked less about house hunting, more about his long hours, his exhaustion. The dream seemed to be momentarily paused, but the foundation, the money, was still there, still growing. I held on to that. I needed to hold on to that. Then came the statement. Not the usual one. An unexpected notification email from the bank about an unusual activity alert on our joint savings account. My heart gave a weird lurch. Fraud? Had someone hacked us? I clicked it open, my fingers fumbling slightly. The number was still large, but significantly smaller than it should have been. A massive withdrawal. A single, enormous transaction listed as wire transfer, real estate escrow. My breath hitched. Had he found a place? Our dream home? Had he surprised me? Excitement warred with confusion. Why wouldn't he tell me? I scrolled down looking for details. The recipient name wasn't a real estate agency we discussed. It wasn't a seller's name I recognized. It was a law firm, a name I'd never heard of, located across town from where we were looking. And in the memo field, a property address. Not a house address. A unit number. An apartment. A condo. My mind reeled. A condo? We wanted a house. We talked about a yard, maybe a fixer-upper we could work on together. Not a condo. And why wire our down payment, the vast majority of it, to a random law firm for a condo I knew nothing about? Panic began to prickle at the base of my skull. I dug deeper, clicking links, trying to find information about the address. It was a new development. High-end. Expensive. Far more expensive than the houses we'd been looking at, even considering the large down payment. My hands started to shake. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. He came home late that night, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. The air felt heavy, suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to ask him. Not yet. The statement was open on the laptop. He saw it. His face went pale, then flushed. "What's this?" I managed, my voice thin and reedy, barely recognizable. He stammered, fumbled for words. Tried to spin a story about an investment opportunity, a quick flip, something he couldn't tell me about because it was sensitive. The lies dripped from him, thick and nauseating. But the address, the amount, the secrecy, it didn't add up. The perfume was a screaming accusation in the silent room. Over the next few days, the truth, in its brutal, sharp-edged entirety, began to surface. Piece by agonizing piece. He hadn't bought an investment. He had bought that condo. Not for us. Not for himself. For her. Her name surfaced first, whispered by a mutual acquaintance who had seen him. Then confirmed by cross-referencing the law firm's name with public property records, a desperate, frantic search late at night while he slept, or pretended to sleep, beside me. The condo was purchased in her name. Using our money. My grandmother's money. The money I had saved. The money intended for our future. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a theft. A calculated, financial hijacking of our shared life. Every discovery was a physical blow. Finding photos of them together online, carefully hidden, but there if you knew where to look. Confirming the closing date, just days before the bank notification I received. Realizing his late nights were spent feathering a nest that wasn't ours. The down payment for our future, the one we dreamed of, was funding their present. The initial shock gave way to a raw, burning pain that consumed everything. I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. The house we lived in, our rented space filled with our shared history, felt poisoned. Every object seemed to mock me, a relic of a life built on a lie. I would sit in the living room, the silence pressing in, and just feel the gaping hole where my trust used to be. It wasn't just the money, though the scale of the financial betrayal was staggering. It was the calculated cruelty of it. Using our shared dream fund to build a life with someone else. It was a desecration of our past, present, and future. Confrontation was useless. He deflected, minimized, blamed me for being suspicious, for not trusting him enough. He twisted everything, painted himself as the victim of my unreasonable demands, my lack of faith. He was a master manipulator, I realized, or maybe I had just been too blind, too trusting, to see it before. He even tried to argue that technically, since it was a joint account, the money was his too, and he could do what he wanted with it. As if that somehow erased the years of shared dreams, the explicit purpose of that fund. As if it wasn't my inheritance that made up the bulk of it. The gaslighting was relentless, another layer of abuse piled onto the betrayal. I stopped arguing. The pain was too deep for words. The lies were too elaborate to dismantle in a shouting match. A cold resolve began to set in, born from the ashes of my shattered heart. Arguing with him was like trying to reason with a fire. I needed a different approach. I went through the motions of daily life like a ghost. Work felt distant, unreal. Conversations with friends were strained. How do you explain that the man you built your life with used your life savings to buy a love nest for another woman? The shame was suffocating. I felt like a fool. A naive, pathetic fool who had handed over everything, my heart, my future, my grandmother's legacy, and had it tossed aside for someone new, someone shiny and anonymous. Every corner I turned led to a dead end. The law firm was tight-lipped, citing client confidentiality. The property records only showed the transfer of ownership to her name. The bank said the wire transfer was initiated and authorized from the account. They couldn't reverse it without the account holder's consent, his consent. And he certainly wasn't going to give that. He acted like I was being dramatic. He even had the audacity to suggest we could move past this, that it was a mistake he'd made, a lapse in judgment. Meanwhile, he was presumably setting up house in the condo bought with my money. My rage simmered just below the surface, a constant, low-grade fever. It felt like I was drowning. The weight of the debt, because technically that money was gone, and the weight of the betrayal were crushing me. I looked at our apartment, the place we were supposed to leave for our new house, and saw only the ghosts of our failed future. He seemed to be moving on, detached, already planning his exit from our shared life, his new one waiting, paid for by me. I felt utterly powerless, bankrupt, emotionally and financially. The down payment, the symbol of our hope, was gone. The future it represented was gone. All that was left was the wreckage. I felt like I had nothing left to lose. Rock bottom has a surprisingly hard floor. I hit it one rainy Tuesday, sitting in the dark, the rain drumming against the window, each drop echoing the tears I couldn't cry anymore. I scrolled through photos on my phone, pictures of us smiling, planning, building that shared dream. They looked like strangers. The woman in the pictures was vibrant, hopeful. The woman sitting here now was a hollowed-out shell. That's when something shifted. Not a sudden burst of energy, but a cold, quiet clarity. This wasn't just about getting the money back. It wasn't just about him. It was about reclaiming myself. Reclaiming the future he tried to steal. He hadn't just taken my money. He had tried to erase me from the narrative, to use my own resources to fund my replacement. And I wouldn't let him. The pain didn't disappear, but it transmuted. The white-hot rage cooled into a hard, dark core of determination. I wouldn't just survive, I would rebuild, and I would use the very foundation he thought he destroyed to do it. He thought he was smart. He thought he had covered his tracks. But betrayal, especially financial betrayal, leaves a trail. And I decided I was going to become a master tracker. My transformation wasn't dramatic, not outwardly. I didn't suddenly become a femme fatale or hire a private investigator, though I considered it. It was quieter, more insidious. I started reading everything I could find about property law, marital assets, financial fraud, civil litigation. I learned about deeds, escrow, closing documents, wire transfers, and the intricate dance of real estate transactions. I spoke to lawyers, not about divorce yet, but hypothetically about complex financial situations within a marriage. Most gave vague answers, citing the need for specifics. But one, an older woman with a sharp gaze and a no-nonsense demeanor, listened carefully when I described a hypothetical scenario involving one spouse using joint funds, specifically identified premarital or inherited funds, for a property titled solely in a third party's name. She didn't give me all the answers, but she gave me the right questions to ask, the right documents to look for, the specific legal terms that could pry open the situation. She mentioned things like constructive trust, tracing of funds, and the vulnerability of transactions where the source of funds doesn't match the title holder, especially when marital assets are involved and potentially mishandled. She stressed the importance of documentation. Every email, every text message, every bank statement, every property record. A paper trail, she said, was more powerful than emotion in court. I became a ghost in my own home, moving silently, gathering evidence. I accessed shared cloud storage he might have forgotten about. I looked through old emails on our shared laptop. I pieced together timelines, cross-referenced dates, and names. The depth of his planning was sickening, but his sloppiness was my opportunity. He was so focused on hiding it from me that he overlooked the lingering digital breadcrumbs, the standard financial and legal procedures that left a record. He thought he was so clever, titling it in her name to keep it separate from our marital assets. But he used marital funds, predominantly my premarital funds, to do it. That was his critical error. The key, I realized, lay not just in proving he used the money, but in proving the money's origin and the fraudulent intent behind the transfer. My grandmother's inheritance was distinct, deposited before our marriage, later moved into the joint savings specifically labeled for the down payment for our house. He had knowingly used funds designated for a specific shared purpose to acquire an asset for someone else. That, the lawyer hinted, constituted something close to fraud or at least a basis for imposing a constructive trust on the property, essentially arguing that the condo was legally held for my benefit because it was purchased with my funds, despite the title being in her name. It was complex, a long shot, the lawyer cautioned, but possible with ironclad proof. I spent weeks piecing it together. Digital copies of my grandmother's will and the initial bank deposit. Statements showing the transfer into the joint account. Emails between us discussing the down payment fund and our house hunting plans. The bank notification of the wire transfer. The property deed showing the transfer to her. Dates, amounts, names. The narrative of betrayal, backed by irrefutable data. It wasn't just a story anymore, it was a case, built on facts. The shift felt tectonic. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an architect of justice, working in silence, building a structure that would collapse his world. The fear remained, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a steely calm. He had underestimated me. He had mistaken my grief for weakness, my shock for surrender. He thought he had won. He was about to learn he had only set the stage for his own undoing. Every click of the mouse, every document I found, every late-night message sent to the lawyer felt like tightening a knot he didn't even know was forming. The time came to act. My plan wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I didn't want to ruin his career or expose him publicly, though the thought was tempting. I wanted what was mine, and I wanted to use his own actions to get it back in the most undeniable way possible. The legal strategy was complex, involving not just a claim against him, but a claim against the property itself, arguing that I held a beneficial interest in it due to the source of the funds. The initial step was crucial, securing my interest before he or the other woman could offload the property. This required filing a specific legal document, a lease pendens, essentially a notice to the public that the property is under litigation and its ownership is disputed. This would prevent it from being sold or refinanced without resolving my claim. The one call wasn't to him. It wasn't to the other woman. It wasn't even the only call I made, but it was the pivotal one, the trigger that set the mechanism in motion. It was to the county recorder's office. I had prepared meticulously, guided by the lawyer's instructions. I had the case number from the initial filing the lawyer had discreetly made on my behalf, the preliminary legal complaint detailing the fraudulent transfer of funds, and the claim for constructive trust. I had filled out the necessary forms for the lease pendens, my hand steady as I wrote the legal description of that condo unit, the one he bought for her with my money. I had paid the filing fee online. Now, I just needed confirmation. The lawyer had said they could process it electronically, but a follow-up call was wise to ensure it was officially recorded and attached to the property's title. I stood by the window, watching the first hint of dawn touch the sky. He was still asleep in the bedroom, oblivious. I held my phone, the number for the county office dialed, but not yet called. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The point of no return. Once this was filed, it would be public record. There would be no going back. Our marriage, already a crumbling facade, would officially be over. He would know I knew, that I had acted, that I was fighting back, not with tears, but with legal force. A profound stillness settled over me. The fear was still there, a cold, metallic taste in my mouth, but it was layered with something else. A deep, quiet power. He had thought I was weak. He had thought I would fold. He had thought he could take what was mine and build his happiness on the rubble of my dreams. But he was wrong. My grandmother's money wasn't just a down payment. It was a legacy, a piece of my history, and I would not let him use it to erase me. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool morning air. My finger hovered over the call button. This wasn't just about money or property anymore. It was about dignity. It was about justice. It was about proving that you cannot steal someone's future and expect to walk away unscathed. I pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before a voice answered, crisp and official. County Recorder's Office. How can I help you? My voice was steady, clear. Yes, I'm calling to confirm the filing of a lease pendens. The case number is, I gave the number provided by my lawyer, along with the property address and unit number. The clerk typed, the sound faint through the phone. The silence stretched, thick with anticipation. My palms were sweating. Was the filing correct? Was there a technical issue? Had he somehow anticipated this? Yes, the voice confirmed. I see the filing here. Received electronically yesterday, officially recorded this morning at 8:03 a.m. A wave of relief so potent it made my knees weak washed over me. And it's attached to the title for? I prompted, needing to hear it explicitly stated. Yes, the clerk confirmed again. Lease pendens recorded against street address, unit number, parcel ID number. The record indicates a dispute regarding ownership based on a claim of constructive trust. It's officially on file. Thank you, I whispered, the word feeling too small for the weight it carried. Thank you very much. I hung up the phone. It was done. The condo he bought for her, the symbol of his betrayal, was now legally entangled, its ownership disputed by me. He couldn't sell it. He couldn't refinance it. He couldn't use it as a clear asset while this claim was pending. And proving my claim, with the documentation I had painstakingly gathered, felt less like a long shot and more like an inevitability. The house he thought he had built with stolen bricks was now sitting on a foundation of quicksand, and I had pulled the lever. I didn't rush into the bedroom to confront him. The power of this moment lay in its quiet certainty. I made coffee, strong and black, the way I liked it. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd spread out house listings and talked about our future. The sun was fully up now, painting the room in a pale, morning light. I waited. I knew he had a morning routine that involved checking his phone, his work emails, maybe the news. And, inevitably, something would pop up. An alert from his bank, maybe, about a change in the property status if he had monitoring set up. Or perhaps the other woman, alerted by her own lawyer if she tried to do anything with the property, would contact him in a panic. I heard him stirring, the creak of the bed, the sound of the shower starting. I remained at the table, sipping my coffee, the warmth spreading through me, chasing away the last remnants of the cold dread that had been my constant companion. The shower stopped. Footsteps padded down the hall. He entered the kitchen, dressed for work, his phone in his hand. He didn't look at me directly. He was scrolling, probably catching up on whatever he'd missed while sleeping. His face, seconds before, had been neutral, maybe slightly harried. As he scrolled, I saw it change. A flicker of confusion. Then, a widening of his eyes. His breath hitched audibly. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty white. His hand tightened around the phone, his knuckles turning bone white. He made a small choke sound, like he'd been punched in the gut. His eyes darted to me, filled with shock, disbelief, and a sudden, dawning horror. What? He croaked, his voice barely a whisper. He wasn't asking what I had done. He was asking how. How I had found out. How I had traced it. How I had managed to strike back in this specific, devastating way. He hadn't just taken my money. He had tried to make me disappear, to make the theft invisible. And I had just made his carefully constructed new reality visible, legally, undeniable, and fundamentally unstable. He stumbled backward, bumping into the counter. His phone slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the floor. He didn't seem to notice. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant, like someone seeing a ghost. The man who had been so confident, so dismissive of my pain, so sure he had gotten away with it, was unraveling before my eyes. His knees buckled. He reached out a hand, as if to steady himself, but found only air. He sank to the floor, not collapsing dramatically, but folding in on himself, a heap of expensive fabric and shattered composure. His head fell into his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent, or maybe stifled, sounds. He wasn't feigning this. This was real. The sheer, blindsiding reality of the consequences landing squarely on him, hitting him with the force of everything he thought he had escaped. He had focused so much on outsmarting me, on concealing his actions, that he had failed to consider the legal framework he was operating within, the rules that applied even to those who thought they were above them. He had used my foundation to build his new house, and I had just earthquake-proofed my claim and demolished his. I didn't move. I didn't rush to him. I didn't feel pity. There was a cold, hard satisfaction, yes, but mostly there was just emptiness. The man I had loved, the man I had planned a future with, was a stranger crumpled on my kitchen floor, broken not by my hand directly, but by the weight of his own deceit, finally returned to sender. The one call had done its work. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant hum of the refrigerator and his ragged breathing. He stayed there for a long time, a statue of defeat. I finished my coffee. The taste was surprisingly bitter. In the days and weeks that followed, the facade of our life crumbled completely, not with the explosive drama I might have once expected, but with the dreary, procedural finality of legal filings and logistical arrangements. He didn't fight the divorce. The shock of the lease pendens, of realizing I wasn't just hurting but acting, had broken something fundamental in him. The legal challenge to the condo, backed by my meticulously gathered evidence of fund tracing, put him in an untenable position. The other woman, it turned out, was furious, not just at him, but at the prospect of losing the condo and being dragged into a lengthy legal battle over something she thought was a clean gift. Their relationship, built on a foundation of stolen hope, predictably dissolved. The legal process wasn't swift, but it was steady. The court recognized the strength of my claim regarding the constructive trust. Faced with the prospect of a protracted, expensive trial he was unlikely to win, especially given the clear paper trail of my inherited funds, he settled. The settlement was significant. I didn't just get my down payment back. I got the condo. It wasn't a victory celebration. Walking through the empty rooms of the condo felt surreal. It was beautiful, modern, sterile. It smelled faintly of fresh paint and betrayal. This was the place he had intended for his new life, paid for with the death of mine. Now it was mine, an expensive, tangible monument to a lie. I sold it. Quickly. Getting rid of it felt necessary, a cleansing. The money from the sale, combined with the return of my initial down payment amount as part of the settlement, gave me a financial cushion I hadn't had before. More than I would have had if we had just bought the house we originally planned. He thought he was taking my future. He ended up inadvertently funding a bigger, more secure one than I could have imagined on my own. The collapse I witnessed that morning on the kitchen floor wasn't just physical. It was the collapse of his carefully constructed reality, the moment the consequences of his actions became undeniable and irreversible. He had gambled everything on my inaction, on my presumed weakness, and he lost spectacularly. I didn't see him again after the divorce proceedings were finalized. I heard snippets through mutual acquaintances his life was diminished. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet shame. The other woman was gone. The grand plan had imploded. My own life is quieter now. The dream of the house with the porch swing is gone, replaced by something less picturesque, perhaps, but infinitely more solid: self-reliance. The financial security I gained wasn't a consolation prize. It was a tool, a means to build a future entirely on my own terms, brick by brick, honestly and transparently. The scar of the betrayal remains, a phantom ache sometimes, a reminder of how easily trust can be weaponized. But the shame is gone. The powerlessness is gone. I took what he tried to use against me, my resources, my vulnerability, his own deceit, and turned it into the foundation for my own strength. It was a bitter victory, yes, steeped in the loss of a shared past that was never truly real. But it was a victory nonetheless. I learned that the paper trail holds no grudges, that facts are relentless, and that sometimes the quietest actions can have the most thunderous consequences. The down payment wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a different, unexpected chapter. And I'm writing it myself now, with a steady hand. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.